Welcome everybody to another episode of Sheroes Unlimited, where I have the great honor of talking to, free flow chatting with some amazing women around the world. And this episode is absolutely no exception. I'm absolutely honored to be talking to Ruth Shanks today. She is an amazing woman. For those of you who aren't in Australia, she is an Australian, and she also has the Queen's Honour of an AM. She's going to talk to us about that as well. But especially, big surprise for Ruth, she hasn't seen this yet. She's also our cover story for the July issue 2020, July issue of BoomerBabesLife Magazine. So we're going to talk to her about her article in this magazine, but we're also going to dig a little deeper as well and find out some things that she doesn't like talking about, because she's just told me off air that she doesn't usually talk about herself. So we're going to change that. Ruth, welcome to Sheroes Unlimited.
Thank you for having me, Jaynie.
Now, first of all, congratulations. You have just moved into your brand new home.
We have, thank you, yes.
How did that all go? Was it stressful or was it okay?
It was only stressful because we were having to downsize so much, because we moved from a 5-bedroom home to a 3-bedroom unit. So, that's been a little difficult to cram all of the things in, but I've had to be very ruthless, so to speak, and discard lots of things that you just collect for no reason at all.
So there was a few garage sales, were there, or were there just?
Well, with the COVID lockdown and things, they was not able to do that. So it was difficult. Some things had to go just to be thrown out. Some things have been kept to be given to op shops and things, but.
Yeah. Well, let me be one of the first outsiders to welcome you to your new home.
Thank you very much.
Ruth, as I mentioned in the introduction, you are the cover story for our July issue of BoomerBabesLife Magazine. Thank you on behalf of everybody at BoomerBabesLife for allowing us to get inside your world, because in particular we focused on your involvement over many, many years with the Country Women's Association. When did you first get involved with Country Women's Association?
In 1969, when I was first married, my mother-in-law was the president of the local branch. And she said, of course, if you want to meet the women in the district, you need to join the CWA. And that basically is the reason why I'm here.
And when she said that to you, what did you think? Did you know much about the CWA at the time, or what was your thought process, or was it just all about scones?
No, I did know all about it, because my mother, not that she'd been a member, but she had lots of friends who were members, and my husband was a farmer at that particular stage. And yes, it was always, CWA, farmers' wives, etc. And but being me, I thought I had to do what my mother-in-law asked me to do, and so I just did it. Whether I didn't have an active role for a number of years, and then I really got into it after a while. Now,
the CWA, Country Women's Association, it's not just in Australia, is it?
It is, as in there are a couple of Country Women's Associations. There's one in Northern Ireland, and there's one in India, but there are lots of organisations such as the CWA in many countries in the world, but they're not necessarily called that. They're called other names like Rural Women New Zealand, and the organisations in South Africa are called the Women's Agricultural Union. So there are lots of different names, but they're basically the same sort of organisation.
And with the CWA, if I can put it this way, when I've been talking to a lot of our members at BoomerBabesLife, and we've talked about the CWA, there's been the general perception is you can only be a part of the CWA if you're a farmer's wife and or you live in the country. Is that true?
No, that's far from the truth. And actually in New South Wales, some of our most active branches are actually in the city and along the coast. I when I was the state president, CWA New South Wales, in the early 2000s, my thought process was that people would say that, but I always say, if you're a woman of this country, Australia, you are eligible to join the organisation. Any woman who lives in Australia is eligible to join the Country Women's Association.
And so with the Country Women's Association, then if I've just heard what you've said, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, now you've really piqued my interest there, Ruth. What sort of things does the CWA get involved in? What do they do?
One of the main things is their advocacy work for, and it relates to rural areas, but also in the city, services provided by government, and things that are not necessarily readily available in the rural areas, and yet people in the city have access, like to a doctor who lives next door. Whereas if you live in the country, you might not be able to get to see a doctor. You might have to drive for 2 hours. And things like telehealth and those sorts of things, which are now becoming prominent because of COVID, are things that we have wanted to do for a long time. But better conditions for children going to school on school buses, who have to go for an hour or so before they can get to school, and the provision of baby health centres and hospitals early on in the piece was one of our major things that we did.
You touched there on COVID. I certainly know for myself, I've learned how to bake.
Yes.
I do have to say, on a personal note, my husband said to me the other night, he said, do you realize it's been 13 weeks since we've had takeaway? You're cooking, we do fish and chips on Friday nights, but I actually do it all myself, which is so, but the reason I'm sharing that with you is we see all over social media so many people saying, showing their photographs of all the different things that they're baking and cooking and what have you. Have you seen, has there been more interest or more requests to the CWA for recipes and things like that over COVID?
There certainly has. It has sparked an interest, and it's actually made people realise that they can be self-sufficient, that they can make cakes and make really good food for their families. There has been lots of requests, and cookbooks have been selling, CWA cookbooks have been selling really well. So there has been this change in persona of people within their homes, realising that we can survive without actually going to have takeaways, etc., etc. So, yes, it has been really, really good. I'm actually coping with a new stove, of course, in a new house. So that's been a little bit interesting as well.
Oh, well, that begs the question, which do you prefer, Ruth, electric or gas?
I have only ever had electric, but my daughter and my son, they have gas, so I don't know. I think it's possibly what you grow up with. And
yes.
We always had electric in our home when I was growing up, so I've never had the opportunity to try gas, but people say it's really good.
I'm a gas girl. I like gas. Now, Ruth, tell us a little bit more about yourself. So you started out with the CWA because your mother-in-law suggested it might be a good idea. And that's actually taken you on a very big journey throughout, hasn't it? Can you share what's happened with yourself with all of that since?
It certainly has widened my opportunities, and I have been very lucky to benefit from those opportunities. But in the beginning, I had my children early. Then after I had my family, I went back to train as a nurse. And so that was a very busy time. And after I finished my training, my local GP said to me, shift work is not really very good for you when you have children, so would you like to come and work in my office? Which I did, and worked in that capacity for quite a number, 25 years. And in that time then, because I was working 9 to 5, basically, I could then, we started an evening branch of the CWA in Dubbo. And so then I became involved with that. Then I worked for a stage for an ear, nose and throat surgeon he always operated on a Monday, so I was free to have Mondays off if I wished. And so the local CWA group said that would I take on a position, and they would have their meetings on a Monday. And so they were instrumental in me becoming involved in the next level. And so I went from the local group to the state executive, became the state secretary, and then state international officer, and then I became the state president from 2001 to 2004. But early on, in the early 90s or in the late 80s, I learned about the international side of CWA, and particularly when I was the state international officer, I found more out about that. I had a great mentor in Jaynie Mitchell from North Star, and she got me involved also with international work. And so then I went on to become the president for the South Pacific area for 6 years. And then somehow or other, I found myself in the world president's seat for 6 years. So.
Wow, that would have been amazing. What did that entail for you? I mean, you've got all of your responsibilities with your family as it is, as a number one priority as well. When you shifted into that incredible role, how did that work for you? How did you fit everything in?
Well, my 3 children were grown up by then and had their own families, and I have a wonderful husband. He's still with me after 51 years, so we can't be too bad. But it was particularly the world position with the office being in London. So, people are now learning to work remotely. Well, I mean, I was working remotely with the staff in London, basically, and I would go to London at least 3 times a year for meetings, and sometimes there on other times when I was on my way somewhere else. So that was different, but it's achievable and it works. I think it works because if you put your hand up to do a position like this, and each time, twice I was re-elected, so it was an election, so it wasn't just someone gave me a job. So if you put your hand up for a position, obviously you want to do it well, and you think that the organisation has great ethics, and that's what I thought. And so I was quite prepared to do the work that needed to be done. So I did lots of travelling, got lots of frequent flyer points, learned to eat aeroplane food, and all of those sorts of things. Yes.
What would you say was one of the great achievements that you felt that you made when you were in that role, Ruth?
I think just bringing some organisations into our organisation. Some organisations had applied to join, so it was great when they could join, but I could then have a visit and encourage them to take part. And we give some general project funding, not a lot, but to go then and see the results of the project funding that we've given, that's probably the highlight, to actually see how much a small amount of money can make a difference in a woman's community, particularly in the developing world.
We've when we mentioned before your article in this month's issue of BoomerBabesLife Magazine, it actually highlights some of those. There's some great photography and there's some great photos in there of some of that international work that you have been involved in. And I think the interest for me reading the article in particular, what it highlighted to me was that we live in our own communities and we live in our own world, if you will, but there are these great opportunities that we can get involved in that help other women and other families and children around the world. It doesn't take a lot, and I think that's what you're demonstrating, isn't it?
Oh, sorry. Yes, it is, because you can belong to the Associated Countrywomen of the World without being a member of another organisation. You can be an individual member. So you can just join as an individual person, but know that what you're contributing, if you're making a donation or even just your membership, can contribute to these sorts of things that we do all around the world.
Incredibly rewarding, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Ruth, the Queen doesn't give honours away willy-nilly, as we say in Australia. She only usually allocates and determines who's going to get an OM or an AM or what have you, because those individuals have demonstrated incredible contributions to the community and to society and to the world in general. You are one of those people.
Just let me correct you firstly, though,
Oh,
because the Queen doesn't give these awards. These are now, the Queen used to give the OBEs and those, and then the Australian government changed that, and so these awards are the Australian government awards, and they're
oh.
decided by a committee. Obviously, people nominate you, and they're decided by Australian Awards Committee in Canberra. Yes.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I didn't realise that.
That's okay.
Bad me.
Okay.
But having said that, I like my story, Ruth, that the Queen chose you. Just quietly.
Yeah.
No, we'll skip
Fair
that one.
Yeah, it sounds really good, yeah.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Now, when did you get this? How did you hear about it? And what was your reaction when you learned of it?
Well, it was quite interesting. It was because there are varying levels, and quite often the person who's been the state president of the association receives that award after you've finished your period of time. And they write to you and say, are you happy to accept the award? You know, so you get this letter out of the blue and you suddenly think, oh, my goodness, because you don't normally know that people have nominated you for that position. So, and the level of the award depends on just how much you have done in the community. So I had been part of a lot of charitable organisations in Dubbo over all of my life, and that contributed to the fact that it was that particular level of award. So yeah, so it's not a medal of the order, it's a member of the Order of Australia. So yes.
Oh, well, congratulations. It's
Thank
just,
you.
yeah, it's just a great honour and another recognition aspect of the great work that you do, Ruth. Ruth, before we let you go, I always ask my Sheroes this very important question. If you had an 8-year-old Ruth in front of you right now, what advice would you give her?
I think the best advice would be that you take everything that you're offered grasp it with both hands and give it your all. And if someone asks you to do a job, regardless of what the job is, they obviously believe that you can do it. They don't, otherwise they wouldn't ask you to do that. So never have any doubt that you have been asked in all sincerity to do a position, because those people think that you are the appropriate person at the particular time for the job. But if you're offered anything, always look at the good side, grab it with both hands, and you don't necessarily have to do a job the same as the last person who did it. You do it to the best of your ability, and that's all anybody can ask you.
That's sensational advice. Thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth, it's been an absolute delight to have you on our Sheroes Unlimited podcast today. Thank you for giving us your time, and especially with, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you've only just moved into your new home, so I know you like everything going on. And again, we really appreciate your time of allowing us to interview you for this issue of BoomerBabesLife Magazine that is out now. Ruth, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure that we've inspired a lot of people to check out more about CWA as well. So
thank you very much, Jaynie. I hope that they do have a look at it. I've always said that in CWA you can find a slice of the cake that suits you. So if you want to be involved, don't necessarily look at the closest branch or whatever. If that one doesn't suit you, someone else in the pile will suit you. So
that is a great advice. And by the way, that's a great tagline. A slice of the cake that will suit you. I love that. Thank you again, Ruth. And for all of you watching us today, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to keep saying it, Ruth is our cover story for the July 2020 issue of BoomerBabesLife Magazine. The article is fabulous. It goes even, there's a lot of information there, but we go deeper with Ruth in this article. Also, there's all the contact details there for the CWA and the other organisations that Ruth has been involved with as well. If you enjoyed this podcast interview today with Sheroes Unlimited with Ruth and you'd like to see more, of course, just go to our website, BoomerBabesLife.com. Go to Sheroes Unlimited. It's all there. And of course, if you'd like to get your copy of the latest issue of BoomerBabesLife Magazine, again, just go to the website, BoomerBabesLife.com, and you'll see this will be the first thing that comes up, this cover, and you'll be able to click onto that and get your copy of that. And remember, subscribe and save, another great way so that you never miss out on any of those. And if you'd like to keep hearing and knowing all about the Sheroes Unlimited podcast, again, just comment below, like, share, and listen on any of your favorite streaming devices. I'm Jaynie Morris, and I've been absolutely delighted to bring this fantastic episode of Sheroes Unlimited for you today. Enjoy this fabulous day.